Hey everybody, welcome to book review number, I think it's 22. I haven't done one of these in a while, but I want to do one on a book I read and I've been meaning to get to, but I'm not. That is Chasing the Dragon Into the Heart of the Golden Triangle by Christopher R. Cox. And what this book is about is it's about a journalist from Massachusetts who kind of was on sabbatical or just had, I guess, some time between writing assignments to investigate this leader, Khun Sa. And originally it was intended to just be, a feature piece in the newspaper, but it wound up being a huge thing. So anyway, to get into it, who Khun Sa is, the Christopher Cox, the writer and also the journalist, investigated, was the largest heroin dealer in the entire world in the 1990s. It's estimated that 2/3, I believe, of all heroin in the world came out of the Golden Triangle region of Southeast Asia. That's the northern tip of Thailand, sort of the western part the eastern part of Burma and the western part of Laos. And also a little bit of Yunnan in China, but if you can imagine where that is, huge heroin production area. Now since then, Afghanistan has overtaken the Golden Triangle, but that's another story. And anyway, Khun Sa controlled half of the heroin trade in the Golden Triangle, so he controlled about 1/3 of the world's heroin trade, pretty much single-handedly. He was so powerful, in fact, that he basically ran this rebel state called the Shan State, which is part of Burma, a rebel state from the country of Burma, primarily financed through his heroin trade, and he posed himself as like a revolutionary, as like standing up for the people, but at the same time was like a huge drug lord. So there was this huge kind of internal fight about these people's rights, which were getting oppressed, and they were oppressed under the Burmese. The Burmese are a terrible government. Burma, also known as Myanmar, is just repressive, horrible state, probably one of the 5 worst states in the world. So he was sort of like an anti-hero in that he had this terrible thing that was driving him, but also had some justice there. Well, anyway, in the book, Chris Cox talks about his journey to try to get an interview with this elusive leader, and he starts with this guy Flynn. I forget what his first name is, but Mr. Flynn, we'll call him, who has been to this area and is kind of a jack of all trades, knowing people in Hollywood. He was an actor, a B-list actor, or maybe even a D-list actor, at certain time periods, but also engaging in all sorts of business ventures, and just kind of a guy that's hard to pin down. And one of the things about Flynn is he actually is probably the closest Westerner at that time period to Khun Sa, and the person that can provide access. So Chris Cox gets to know him. Of course, Flynn is elusive in his own right. They mentioned in the book, he can't, because of outstanding warrants in Thailand, which he actually lives, but they don't enforce it in the area that he lives in. He can't fly directly into the Bangkok airport because that's like the center of the government. This is all in Thailand at this point. Center of the government, they'd arrest him. So he actually flies into Malaysia and sneaks across the Malaysian-Thailand border, and then takes an internal flight, which have less security controls, up to Chiang Mai, which is sort of the northern capital of Thailand. Famous historical site, the old capital of historical capital of Thailand. So anyway, Christopher Cox, along with this guy, Sullivan, who's kind of his partner in crime, and kind of like the strongman for the group, just kind of like the muscle or whatever, go to meet this Flynn, all Westerners in this area. They meet. Nothing essentially happens at first, but there's promises later made that they'll come back. And then eventually they do come back. Okay, my 5 minutes. They eventually do come back to Thailand and are able to sneak across the highly guarded Myanmar Thailand border, guarded on the Thailand side by the Thai. And of course, this area of the country is not controlled by Myanmar, is not controlled by Burma, but is controlled by the Shan state. So they actually mentioned in the book that Thailand actually kind of likes this because it provides a buffer between this kind of outlaw state and Myanmar. And not to say that the Shan state is an outlaw state, it's also an outlaw state, but they're kind of fighting each other, which keeps Thailand out of the whole business. So yeah, they sneak in on a mule train behind all these soldiers on like a path that only locals know. Thousands of years old, well, maybe not thousands of years old, but just kind of the backest of the back roads. And he mentions things that are kind of standard in Southeast Asia, heat exhaustion, all sorts of leeches, just ravenous bugs, any sort of sunburnt. Also, it's mentioned that the geography of the region is pretty much like razor tooth mountains. This all provides advantage to the Shan state and actually their defense because it's so geographically impenetrable. Not to mention that I think it's the Irrawaddy River. No, it's the Salonwi River. The Irrawaddy's in more western Burma, like the main part of Burma, but the Salaween River provides another natural border. It's kind of a river about the size of the Mekong, but it's rapids all the way to its mouth instead of being like calm or whatever, if you know what the Mekong is. So anyway, he gets there and he sees this. Well, I want to say, yeah. So he gets there and he sees this place in this town of about 10,000 people, which is the outlaw capital. Most of the people live on subsistence agriculture in this area, so there's no like huge cities. Not to mention just having huge cities in a rebellious state just is not feasible. But he notices, this is Christopher Cox. When he gets to this outlaw town, I believe it's called Mon something. All right, so we were in Chiang Mai. He eventually gets to Ho Mon and Mai Arc. So Ho Mon, I think is the main one. Across the border. And kind of, he's not initially taken to Kun Sa, who even in his own camp is elusive, but kind of taken to the barracks and the training facilities of the army, the hospital, which, although provided, really, it does well with the resources that it has, but really has no resources. Things like typhoid or something like that might result in death just because they have no access to medical care because they're an outlaw state. They're not even recognized by anybody. And so when he eventually gets to meet Kun Sa, and 2 times, the first time Kun Sa gives this anti-DEA speech, other than the Burmese, who are fighting him within the country of Burma, the Burmese government, his biggest opponent would actually be the DEA because that's where he gets all his money from. Is it the DEA? The FDA? Well, whatever the federal drug crackdown agency is, the ones that, seize all these drugs and really make it hard for drug lords to kind of have their reign. So he goes on this screed against the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency, FBI, all sorts of that stuff. And he also kind of like paints this rosy picture of the people and his rebellion. And then when they get to him a second time, he kind of talks more. He starts out kind of with this larger didactic thing, but then kind of talks about his family and his nieces and nephews, who he's not sure what their future is, considering this precarious situation not only he's in, but his rebellious state is in. And kind of, what else does he talk about? Yeah, I guess that's the main thing. Oh, and then Sullivan. I mentioned earlier that this Christopher Cox, along with Flynn, who was the elusive actor, there was, I think it's Jay Sullivan, who was the other person that went on this. He's a POW survivor, or not a POW survivor, a POW hunter from the Vietnam War. And considering the conspiracy is that a lot of POWs are being held in Laos, he thought that maybe with the influence that Khoon Sa had in the area, he might have some access to some information that just would not be accessible just because of the long tentacles of Khoon Sa throughout the region with the drug lord and everything. He would know about these POWs. And actually, as a little side note, I found this quite interesting just because it kind of goes back to a previous book, Hardman Humble, which is a book about Vietnam veterans living in Southeast Asia, and a number of them are POW hunters, people that still think POWs from the Vietnam War are there. So they actually mention how like Bro Gritz was someone that Jay Sullivan worked with in attempting to extract supposed POWs from Laos. But when Sullivan asked Khe Sanh about this, Khe Sanh said he actually knew nothing of POWs being held in Laos, which, of course, that fight has not been given up. But for Jay Sullivan, he pretty much saw the writing on the wall and kind of gave up that fight. Now, what did I specifically like about the book? Well, as I sort of, you could infer, there were only 2 interviews, and a lot of it was kind of getting to Khe Sanh, or Khoon Sa, not Khe Sanh. Khoon Sa, the Shan state rebellion leader. That's what the majority of the book took up, not really the interviews. And kind of what was really good was that it was very informative about like the issue and the DEA and the way the Thai government works, which although more in the pocket of the U.S. government than Burma, which is kind of recognized but kind of outsider state as it is, Thailand is a kind of fully recognized state and respected state. But, they don't enforce their drug laws to the degree that the United States wants them to, and it's a huge source of tension because they just don't do it. And so it covers that whole history of it, but it's not a history book, and that's what was really enjoyable, was that for everything about the political rule, or Sorak, which is the name of the army in Myanmar, the main army that's taking on Khoon Sa and trying to crush him. There were also stories of, them and their guides, who were these impoverished rebels, drinking warm absolute vodka and Tang at like 1 o'clock in the morning just to do something because there was nothing else to do in this middle of nowhere jungle redoubt, fortress. They would talk about stories about the guy named the Sailor, who was a local heroin addict in Boston, which is where Christopher Cox is from, and talk about the opium addict, which is in the Shan state. So, even though these two places, the place where the heroin is consumed in the U.S. and where it's produced is miles apart, they still have the exact same problems, maybe not with heroin, but with another side product of heroin, which is opium, and morphine within the Shan state itself. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. We're getting it right at 15 minutes. Boom. Check it out. Yeah, I'm sure there's more I want to say later, so I might put another video, maybe not. But anyway, we're getting really close, so bye. Chasing the dragon to the heart of the gold, into the heart of gold.